Hey everybody, welcome to episode 58 of FoundersGyan and thanks for tuning in. This week we have the founder trio of Nikhil Joyce, TJ and Setu on our show. They're the founders of Eventosaur, a platform for, your events like pujas, catering and so on. We also talk in depth about usability testing and user persona creation on the show, which I'm sure will be very valuable to all you startups out there. So don't miss that part. Do check out foundersgyan.com/EP58, that is 58, for the show notes for all that we talk about on the show. And also check out our archives at foundersgyan.com for 50 plus episodes. Alright, let's get started now. Nikhil, TJ and Setu, great to meet you. Nice to be chatting with you also. So thanks a lot for taking time out and agreeing to be on the show. We are also going to be talking in depth about usability testing and persona creation later on in the show. But let's first start with the concept of Eventosaur. So when I first read your About Us page, you had mentioned that there was a need that you wanted to solve. So is there a story here that I can sense a story here?
Sure.
Is there one?
Yes, there is. So all three of us are from Bangalore. We are local Kannadiga boys, but I also happen to be half Teluguite, and the stereotype is true. Most of my family does stay in the US. Sometime in late 2014, what happened was I lost my uncle and aunt in quick succession over a couple of months, and my cousins had to come down to India to do the last rites and the funerals and all of that. And since I was their local contact, in the sense that I was the local guy who knew the language and knew the place, I was in charge of finding the pandit, finding a caterer, finding a venue for these things and all of that. My family's been in Bangalore for about 40 years, and despite that, my dad and I, we found it super hard to go, look for these service providers, figure out what works, what doesn't, what the pricing should be and all of that.
Right.
And this came at a time when I was already using online resources for everything. Like, late 2014 was when I was already buying my movie tickets online. I had an app that would get me a cab whenever I needed. I was buying my groceries online.
Right.
And as Indians, these events are something that we spend a lot of money on, a lot of time on, a lot of effort on.
Right.
I mean, the big fat Indian wedding is something that all of us know.
Right.
There are families that have bank accounts that are saved up for these events. We probably spend more on pujas and rituals and havans than we do on vacations, most of our middle class families. And the way things work had not changed at all over the past 2-3 decades. Another thing that spurred me on later on was that I had my niece flying down. I shared my birthday with her, and we had to have a small naming ceremony of sorts for her in India. And the way that had to be done, the way that had to be arranged, the way the event planning happened was exactly the same way, the way ours was done 25 years ago. There had to be a change. There had to be something that made the whole process a little more efficient. So Setu and I, at the time, we were running a startup already.
Right. So before we get into that, I just want you guys to quickly introduce yourself and what roles you do, because I'm sure our listeners must be wondering who's this talking about his life story, right?
Sure. So I'm Nikhil. I run sales, marketing, operations, and the cleaning of the room at Eventosaur. I do most of the stuff that I can't do, and I also pretend to understand tech and design because I don't handle those directly myself.
Okay.
I'm Tejavant.
TJ, we'll use TJ, your acronym.
So I handle the tech and a little bit of the finance and those things. And
I'm Setu. I handle everything related to design and user research and usability studies.
Right. So before the recording, we were just talking, and Setu, you were mentioning that you work out of Seattle, and you just came in for some work and for this interview. So thank you very much for that. So how did you guys get together? So I think Nikhil, you were about to just touch on that.
Yeah.
So could you just continue there?
Yeah, so Setu and I have known each other for about 5-6 years now, 6 years maybe, and it's been via Twitter, as odd as it sounds. And Setu and I actually started a company together called The Next Chapter sometime in 2014. And we were working on it when we got this idea, and there was a lean period going on in that startup, which is when we realized there's a gap here that our skill set would help. Now TJ and I went to school together about 10 years ago.
We went to this place called Diksha, and we went from first bench to last bench, and eventually out of the class
Together.
So Nikhil told me the idea about around March last year. He told me that he's thinking of working on something in this space, and I just shrugged it off, thinking it's okay. I recently quit my job, my previous job back then. I was freelancing as a photographer, and 2-3 days after Nikhil told me this, I had a family crisis where something of this sort would have helped me a lot. So I called back Nikhil and told, hey, we need to create this. There are people who need this desperately. And so quickly enough, we had a static page with just a picture, no clickable elements, nothing. And we bought the domain name. We created social personas for this, and just put the word out there saying that there is something of this sort that we are trying. And within a week of doing that, we ended up getting our first order.
Wow. Okay. So how did you spread this word across? You just had a static page, right? I mean.
Yeah. So we put the word out on Twitter, like changed our bios and stuff. We have a pretty decent following.
Yeah, I think all three of us are pretty decent on Twitter. We got our mothers to like the Facebook page, so we had about 8 to 10 likes on Facebook as well. One fine day, the founder of a company called Bookard was just browsing through Twitter, found my Twitter profile, bio had, Eventosaur 140, which is our handle on Twitter, and he just went and checked it out, found out that we're working on something in the traditional event space, immediately found the static page had a phone number, it had my personal phone number, and it had a Gmail ID. Yeah. So he found my phone number, called me up at 11 p.m. in the night and said, hey, is this Nikhil from Eventosaur? Yes. I'm looking for a priest tomorrow. We have a kitchen opening ceremony. I'm from Chandigarh. My dad's asking me to have a puja. Is this something you guys deal with? And we didn't. We actually had only Kannada and Telugu priests back then. But I said yes anyway. And the next morning, Setu woke up at 5 a.m. TJ and I woke up at 6 a.m. and we started running around looking for Hindi-speaking priests, and we managed to get that order.
Okay.
And Anuj was super grateful, wrote a long Facebook post about us, and within the next day we had another customer
coming in.
Wow,
So
nice.
most of our customer base has been through referrals and
Word of mouth.
So especially the first few customer set that we got were mostly because of this. So people who availed our services, they were pretty happy. They started talking about us to other people, and that's how we started getting more and more orders.
Nice. So again, coming back to the fact that you didn't have any priests on the platform. Now, obviously, it's a difficult situation for any marketplace, right? You need those people in, and especially we are talking about people who are completely not used to IT. Though I think it is very much changing. I mean, I've seen like priests riding motorcycles, and I'm sure they use Ola, Uber. I mean, we have plumbers coming using apps and coming home. So I'm sure it is changing slowly or maybe rapidly. Rapidly. Okay, rapidly. So how did you crack that problem? I mean, how did you get? You just got a contact of priest numbers. You had them on an Excel sheet or something. What did you start with?
So we did a lot of groundwork initially. We started randomly going into some temples. We started pitching them the idea, and we got quite a lot of good responses. People were quite excited to hear that they are getting an online presence. So far, these priest caterers are for the people who didn't have any social presence, any online presence. And I think on some lines they were desperately looking to get into something like this, and quite a lot of them were pretty excited when we told them that here's the service that you can, connect to users using online services and all that. And that's how we started building our inventory. We started just going into temples, we started going into events and talking to the caterers, PDs there, and that's how we signed up a lot of vendors. And we were very particular about the quality also. we didn't want to compromise on the quality. So all the vendors that we were signing up were mostly people who we use their services, who we knew they are good with whatever they do, and those were our initial set of vendors, because quality of service was our most important thing, especially when customers don't know who their vendors are, right? We have to be very spot on the service. So that's how we started growing our vendors.
One other thing that helped us a lot was that in the beginning, even though we were providing only one service provider or at max two to each customer, it's not a scalable practice, but we made it a point, at least one of us would go and attend these events to get event feedback on how things went, how are things going, what could we improve about the whole experience, what are the pain points that the families that are hosting these events experience and all of that. And when this happened,
so you physically any specific reason for that? Why not just a phone call or a email follow up?
It's more personal when you go down there like physically. It's easier to gauge the responses and all that when you have these conversations face to face.
I think that's a nice point here, because I think a lot of startups are taking the easy route out. They don't want to put in the hard work and the struggle. They're happy, myself included. It's nothing to do with startups. I think it's just human psyche.
It's our generation which is this way, I guess.
Laziness, you could say. We don't really want to go and meet people. We'd rather do it over a phone call or a Skype. So I think that's a nice thing that you guys did. Now I know our deep dive topic is about usability testing and user personas, but I think it's a very strange journey for you guys, right? I mean, because the last person you would expect to talk about usability testing is somebody who started with a static web page, but I think you guys have kind of like moved from that really a long way. I mean, no offense to the starting, obviously you guys were just testing it out, right? So let's start off with a very simple question on how do you approach the entire concept of this usability testing?
So let me tell you why we started usability testing. Initially, we launched our product sometime in August of last year, and when we launched that product, it was something that we thought was the perfect solution. We released it, and then when we started looking at customers using the product, we realized there were some gaps. Things weren't going on the way we expected it to work. People were getting confused. And then we thought, okay, there's something going wrong there. And it's at the same point I went to the university and I started learning about UX design, more human-centered design, and that's where I got introduced to the concept of usability testing. So basically what we do is before we build a product, before we ship it, we create prototypes and we test it with users to see if this is the real solution, if what our assumptions or what we think is the solution is really the valid solution.
Right.
So we test it with users and then we validate the idea and we iterate on those ideas to get the right solution, and then we start shipping it. So it's a long process of testing and iteration.
Right. So when, let's say for our listeners out there who are wanting to create their own startups, they obviously have several challenges. One, they need to come up with a minimum viable product, they need to get customers, they need to do usability testing also, right? So the usability testing obviously has to be done on a set of real customers, right? You can't have like few of your friends, who or within your company who already know about what the product is and ask them to test it out, because you know very well how the flow is going to be and etc. Right? So so let's talk about user personas. I think that's a good point that maybe many startups don't know about. So from my limited understanding, user personas, you kind of give the user a description or maybe a name, age, some kind of demographics, right? Sure. Basically, you give the user a demographics and kind of design the product around the demographic. So in your case, it would be people who want these pujas or who want these events. Could be
a lot deeper than that.
Okay.
So we have at Eventosaur we have 4 main categories of user personas.
Right.
Who want these events. All of
Right.
them are our users, all of them buy from us, but they're all different. So
Right.
since we're only live in Bangalore, we start off with Bangalore. It's a market we understand. We divided the user base into 2 halves. One half is from Bangalore, one half isn't. They migrated to Bangalore for various reasons. It could be work, it could be study, anything of that
Right.
sort. Then we further divided this entire group into other 2 halves. There are people who are self-motivated to be event hosts. People who want to plan an event, people who want to do these planning access, these whole activities on their own. And then there are people who are pressurized into it. It can be by a mom, by a dad, by a wife, by a husband, by a boyfriend, by a kid, anything of that sort.
Right.
These are people who are pressurized into hosting these events.
Right. No dearth of those people.
No dearth of those people. We have loads of those, and we love those people at Eventosaur. So, having these 4 segregations helps us have 4 distinct personas. So we have people from Bangalore who are self-motivated in hosting these events. Then we have the people from Bangalore who are not self-motivated, who need to be pressurized into hosting events. Then we have the people who are not from Bangalore but have an interest, self-interest in being hosts. And then we have our sweet spot, people who are not from Bangalore but have pressures from outside and they don't want to host events.
Right.
So it could be like, as in the example of our first customer who was from Chandigarh.
Right.
And he wasn't interested in having a puja, but his dad was. So he told him, can you please have a puja?
Right.
And we were the ideal solution because we were convenient, we were quick, and in exchange for a little bit of money, we got everything done from one end to the other. So we have these 4 main personas. Of course, in depth, we have names for these personas. We know how much they earn. We know what their, where they work. We know how they commute. All of that. We know what apps they have on their phone.
What
But
they
on the
like,
basic-
what they dislike, their
So
frustrations.
how do you is it like for an industry standard, or is it for your specific niche, or what's I mean, you can go as deep as you want or as shallow as you want, right? So how did you guys decide, okay, 4 is what we want, or can you give us some tips on, like, because I mean it's a deep topic, right? You can create 100 user personas also, right?
So there's no industry standard as such. There is
Right.
absolutely no standard about how many personas you can create. It all depends on what problem you're trying to solve and who you're trying to solve it for. And these personas are basically your user base, grouped into one person.
Right.
So as Nikhil just said, we have 4 different kinds of users who are our users.
Right.
And for these users, we thought, okay, this particular person fits this whole category of people, and then this person fits this whole category of people.
So
That's
we
our
have
4
like
representations.
These are the 4 generalizations that we have for our entire user base.
Right.
And it
so
helps
maybe
us,
use the 80-20 rule. Maybe 80% of your customers, if
Yes.
they fit into these
exactly.
4 personas, I think that's good enough. So maybe find out where 80% of your customers or revenue is going to come from, and create personas for them, because you can't obviously have it for 100% of people, right? So you were also mentioning everything about these users. So is that out of some market research? How did you get more in-depth detail about these personas? Because you all are same Kannadigas, right? So I mean, you fit into one persona probably, but there are like other 3 personas out there, right?
True. I think it helps that we've all studied outside and that we have a variety of friends. But on a more serious note, it helps that we now have a whole set of our initial users who we can map back to these personas. So the persona creation didn't happen on day 1. We made a lot of mistakes. We got a lot of customers. We made some money, and then we started making these personas, getting into more of a design thinking mindset. And today when we look back, we are able to map our users back to these personas. And we realize that the people who use us first, and since we didn't spend any money to get our initial users, these are real users for whom there was a pain point. These are people who put real money where their mouth is. And now we know their characteristics, and we see these patterns, these trends emerge between their profiles, and that helps us solidify the personas, so to speak.
Okay, so once you have these personas, what next? I mean, what are we supposed to do? Okay, we have created these personas.
It's exactly what you said about the 80-20 rule.
Right.
So 80-20 rule helped us boil it down to 4 personas.
Right.
Now in these 4 personas, we again create an 80-20 rule where we know which of our users we can reach more easily, how the messaging can be. So for example, our fourth category user, which is a user from outside the city and is not interested in hosting an event but has external pressure, that's the user we see with the highest volume and highest revenue. And reaching out to this user, actually having our messaging and our branding reflect what this user needs makes more sense than trying to appeal to a local Kannadiga who's interested in having this event. So this helps us in number one, our marketing efforts, number two, the way we brand things, and while building the product, if this user can go through this, then that's good enough for us to start shipping.
So as a designer, I look into these personas as my reference when I'm designing things. So when I'm building something, I look at this person, his needs and requirements, his frustrations, and I see if this person is using my website, what would he do, right? And I would design for his requirements. And his requirements will fit a huge group of people.
Right.
And that's how personas help me when we are designing things.
Right. And how do you get this feedback loop, right? So you design it for a specific set of people, and then you kind of release it, and then they have to use it, and then they have to come back, right? So how do you capture
So that's where the usability testing thing happens.
Right. So let's talk about that.
Yeah. So when we know what our users are, we don't build it and then ask people to use it. What we do is we create very low frame wireframes, and we create some quick paper prototypes with it, and then we put it in front of people, and then we tell them, okay, this is a website. Here is your scenario. We give them a scenario like
it's a story, basically. We tell them a story that imagine, in case of Eventosaur, we'll be like, imagine you've moved to Bangalore and you've bought a house and you want to invite 50 of your close friends, 30 of your relatives from back home and have a Griha Pravesh puja with a pandit who speaks your language. This is the menu.
So they'll have a proper scenario, and then they'll have a task list, and they'll start using the prototypes as they would use a website. And we observe them how they use it.
So it is like a piece of paper, or it's some graphic?
It's just a piece of paper.
The multiple ways of doing it. The easiest being is a paper prototype.
Right.
It's the fastest.
Okay.
Yeah. So once we see how they use it, we get a quick idea about how they are using it. If they are able to successfully complete their task, if there's something that's stopping them, and we keep talking to them all the time. We keep asking them, why did you press there? If they got stuck somewhere,
very verbal about.
So I'm actually a little confused about this, and I'm not sure how many of our listeners know about this. So in a paper-based prototype, how do you go through the screen? So let's say he presses one button, so you will push the next paper in front of him?
Yes, exactly.
That's exactly what we do.
Okay.
So we give them a pen or a marker or something of the sort. Tell them use this like you would use a mouse pointer.
Right.
There's a printout of exactly how the web page might look. It's a little low fidelity in the sense that it won't have images and all that. It'll be blocks. It'll be like well labeled and all that.
Right.
And there'll be like buttons that are really well labeled, and they'll have a task list on the side which says, task 1. Once they complete that, they can go to task 2. And we make it amply clear to them that this is not a test of their ability to understand. They are the king or the queen, and the only thing we're testing here is the design itself. And we encourage them to be super vocal. We usually have a joke or two. We tell them to be like the cricket commentator they hate the most. And we tell them to go into Sunil Gavaskar mode and tell them, just keep rambling on, keep telling us, give us a visual, verbal commentary of what you're doing. And what happens when so number one, because it's a paper prototype, their expectations are low.
Right.
They are not using it, they're using it like they would use a website, but they're not fussing around about, why is there no image here, why is there no, so the low level stuff, the shallow stuff is gone. What remains is exactly the flow, which is what you want to test in a design, prototype. And then what happens is, as and when they're going through the entire process, you get to see on their faces where they're delighted, where they're confused, what made them angry, what made them, really sad about, what am I doing? And then someone like Setu or TJ or me is around, and we swoop in and we ask them a series of why questions. We keep asking them why. Why did that make you feel angry? Why did that make you feel frustrated? You smiled just then. Why? What made you happy? Find it that make you happy. So once you do enough of these tests, you kind of figure out what makes people tick, what makes people go through a process, what kind of tiles, buttons are easy to find for people, where can you place things.
So it's basically to understand their thought process. So
yeah, and I think the 5 whys, right?
Yeah,
If
5
you
whys.
ask 5 whys,
Exactly.
you will get to the root of anything, whether a person is happy or unhappy.
So design is a process where you're taking a few assumptions of your own and you're starting off. Testing these assumptions becomes really important because you can't be naive enough to believe your assumptions were spot on the very first time.
Okay. If you like this show, do follow us on Facebook and Twitter. The link is www.facebook.com/FoundersGyan and twitter.com/FoundersGyan. Both these provide you daily tips and articles as well as resources to help and inspire your startup. There are multiple tips per day. Some examples of these tips would be articles on the latest startups, growth hacking tips, how do you build team for startups, how to get funding, etc. So don't forget facebook.com/FoundersGyan and twitter.com/FoundersGyan. Great. So any top tips for usability design, user persona creation, usability design, usability testing? Any top tips that has worked really well for you, and any top any tools that you would recommend that will make this easier for our listeners?
So if I have to give some tips, I would probably say do usability testing at every stage of the product and not just early or not just too late, because it always helps to do testing and then iterating on the product.
Engineering is much more expensive, more expensive than testing the product at a prototype level.
Right.
Yeah, because once you build the product, it has taken a lot of effort, a lot of time,
and you're biased to keep it as it is.
Correct.
Yeah. Also, when you're doing the testing, I would recommend not to bias a user into doing something that you want them to do. So try to keep the feedback as honest as possible.
Can you give can you think of an example where you can bias a user into?
So, for example, if there's a button on the screen, asking them directly to press that button is a direct bias. So instead, I would probably ask them,
okay,
what might you do next?
Right.
If you accomplish this task, where would you click? Instead of telling, okay, you're done with this task,
press on submit.
So
right,
exactly,
okay.
That's not giving me any real feedback. So keeping it very open-ended and also non-biased is will give you a lot of honest feedback, and
that is pretty difficult actually.
Yeah,
it's very easy to bias someone else into thinking how you want them to think.
Yeah,
right. So it's tough, right?
Usability testing takes a lot of practice, and
so do you guys have some background on that? I mean, how did you?
So we've been learning from Setu mostly, and like he's been giving us a lot of tips. So I know you asked for best practices, but one of the best not to do things.
Right.
For a person like me, I'm a natural sales guy. I take BMTC buses so that I can sell to the people next to me. I take Uber pools so that I can sell to them. So when a salesperson like me is doing usability testing, there is a temptation within to want to sell your product,
right?
Which is again bias, but then it's a different kind of bias where you're kind of selling all the time. So it's very important to switch off the sales mode and go into very open, very thick-skinned, open feedback mode where you're open to anything the user is saying, where you're not questioning anything, and where you're not defending your product or your design. You're just open to suggestions and you keep going in that process.
Okay, and any top tools, design tools or usability tools that you can recommend?
So it depends on what stage you are doing the testing at. If it's a very early stage concept, then paper prototype is free. All you have to do is create some wireframes, take a printout and start quickly testing. That's the fastest process.
Right. There's one thing I saw or read, POP, right? Prototype on paper.
Yeah. So that works well for mobile prototyping, and there's a website called usertesting.com. I think they have some free user testing profiles. I'm not sure, but
there's one called mockups.
There are a lot of online prototyping tools for websites and phones and stuff.
There's InVision. So these are things people can use to quickly validate and prototype. But then it also depends on what stage your product is at.
Right.
If it's a very early concept, paper works.
Right.
If it's something,
Sketches work basically.
yeah. If it's something slightly more a working prototype, then you could just do it on your computer.
Right.
You could also set up remote usability testing, send out your prototype to other people, and you can record. So there are a lot of ways usability testing can be done depending on what stage the product is at and what feedback you're trying to get from people.
Right. Okay.
Yeah.
Okay. Great. That's great. Yes. Now let's talk about the technology behind the scenes. So give us a very high level overview. Obviously, we can't go in depth into that on how this entire. I just had a very brief look at your website, and I could see that there were different things you can either arrange a caterer or there are different things like pujari. So how does it work behind the scenes? What's the engine that?
So what we've done is like since from the idea phase to since we actually launched beyond a static site, we did a lot of homework to get data on how much everything would cost. So we've spoken to a lot of vendors. We have like a ton of data on this. And when you do go to the site and when you do customize your menu or change the puja and whatnot, you'll see an estimate that changes like as and when you do it. So essentially what the site is a form where we capture your requirements, and in the back end it's all Python based, and we send out a request to vendors near your area, wherein we tell them, hey.
So how do the vendors? What kind of notification do the vendors get?
It's basically text message based as of now, but we're building an app on an Android.
You had mentioned this. The vendors are not very tech savvy and whatnot.
Right.
But what we found is they're really good with stuff like WhatsApp and SMSs and those kind of things. So it's all text based, wherein they can interact also with pictures and voice notes.
So they get. So supposing I'm a vendor, so I get a text message, and now how do I confirm or?
So suppose I'm a user who wants 100 plates of food, and I've decided the menu on Eventosaur, and I stay in Indranagar, and the neighboring areas are Domblur, CV Raman Nagar, and Kormangla. 10 vendors, including you, get a notification saying there is a request for 100 plates of XXXXX food on so and so date in Domblur. This is the location, and you have to get back with the best possible quote per plate or as a total. So in essence, the vendors are competing against each other.
Vendors are bidding basically.
It's a reverse auction where they're bidding against each other.
But you have already told the price to the customer, right?
So we have already told an estimate to a customer.
Estimate, okay.
Yeah, and we have enough data to say it very confidently because we know we are going to get as low as that or lower than that.
Right, okay.
So we can pretty much promise that it's going to be around that range. And then our algorithm basically filters on the basis of geography, on the basis of user ratings, on the basis of a bunch of factors, which is of course where the secret sauce lies. And we figure out who the best match for you is. And in this way, this process is repeated across vendors. So at the end, what you're left with is a beautiful team of vendors tailor-made for your requirements. Nothing else is taken into consideration except your budget and your requirements. So you have a team that.
So you get. So the algorithm runs and it spits out one vendor, or it spits
in a priority order.
It spits out the order.
Yeah.
Right.
So
okay.
Depending upon availability, again they send back with the availability. So either choice one is assigned. If choice one backs out, then choice two is there. That's all.
So the user gets one vendor per service
per category.
Right.
Yes.
All right. Okay. And also in terms of the text message. So obviously there's a lot of inputs, right? But text message has some limitations, right? On number of characters. So how do you overcome them? You send 2-3 text messages.
So we have a vendor app for the vendors, and on the app there is no limit on the text length and those kind of things. So
it's basically what we pitch it to them as is it's their WhatsApp for work. It's an Eventosaur partners app, kind of like your Uber partner app, where that becomes their WhatsApp for work. So all the messages they get there, they know these are qualified leads that can convert into a sale.
Right. Okay. Excellent. Now, do you have any plans for expansion apart from Bangalore, what's it looking like in terms of expansion plans?
Sure. So we have two kinds of expansions that we're looking at. Number one is, of course, geographical expansion. Bangalore is a great place to start. We love Bangalore. We are born and brought up here. But there are more cities. There are more tier 2 cities. There are more tier 1 cities to go to. A lot of countries. Event planning as an industry is broken. It's a very fragmented industry, and we feel with technology we can actually make it a lot better, the process. So we're looking at expanding to a lot of places, Chennai, Mysore, Pune. We get requests from Delhi, Pune, Ahmedabad all the time, and we'd love to serve these people. So we are looking to, maybe after a small fundraise or something of the sort, run a few data-backed experiments. These are geographical. Apart from that, we started off with a category which is traditional events, which is mainly because all three of us come from kind of conservative families and we understand this market well. But now that we've been in the industry for a while and we've actually done corporate events, birthday parties, all those kind of things, and weddings, categorically also we would like to expand. So we're constantly adding new vendor types.
Like we've handled, we've onboarded partners for logistics, choreographers, DJs. Things that help you with events like Sangeet or weddings and those kind of things also. And that is something that we want to work on in Bangalore first. Get more categories of vendors in, so we can just serve a large variety of events.
The underlying technology and the funda behind the whole process will still be the same.
Right.
But we understand that events can be served.
Yeah. So I think once you have the engine running in the background and you have a little bit of expertise in the area, I think expanding into other categories is just a kind of
it's plug and play.
Yeah, you just have to tweak. But that brings me to another question, which is the challenges in onboarding these vendors. Already I think Setu, you mentioned that they were actually very happy that that there's something like that, but surely if we go into these traditional verticals, there would be a lot of resistance, right? So whether any of that, or was that a big challenge, or what would you say was the biggest challenge you faced so far in your journey?
We've had resistance in terms of a few communities wherein everyone in the community knows each other already. So people there wouldn't, they weren't ready to go outside and get customers from outside type.
Right.
Basically, we're trying to change an entire mindset of people, right? People are used to planning their events in one way for the last 2 or 3 decades, and right now we're trying to disrupt that whole model, both from the customer side as well as from the vendor side. So that disruption is something that is kind of a challenge for us. We have to tell people that it's okay to book your events online.
Right. People might think it's unholy or something, right?
Unholy. I think as Indians, we have this tendency to romanticize effort. We are people who brag about working 16-hour days. It's the same goes for events. So we've had people who say, it won't feel like I put in the effort to have my son's birthday party.
Okay.
That feeling does not arrive, but we tell them spend that time spending time playing cricket with him and having more fun while we take care of things that are not your core competence.
Right. I think it kind of stems from a guilty mind or whatever. I mean, if they use this, then basically they're just putting in the money, right?
It's the hard work kind of a thing. I mean, no one wants to be smart about things anymore.
Right.
In such things at least.
Right. Okay. So you'd say the biggest challenge, is there any other challenge that you faced?
One more challenge that we find once in a while, and we're very glad we're solving this, is on the financial side. A lot of these service providers are very small scale and they might not be under the tax bandwagon, and we'd like to bring them on board, teach them how to have legal, ethical transactions, and make sure that they start accepting online payments, because this is an industry that's worked on cash for a very long time.
Right.
We are changing how it works. We accept online payments, we accept checks and all of that.
Right.
We are legitimizing the entire industry.
Okay, excellent. Now, if you had to do it all over again, you're more than a year and a half, I think. Year and a half, right? March, you thought of the idea in March and kind of. So, what would you kind of like do different if you had to start this, say, today?
Talking from the product side, I would probably do the design process that we are doing right now more sooner. So basically, we built a product, we based on complete assumptions, and then we thought that would work, but then it didn't. So I would probably go back and start creating prototypes and then testing it before building the product, and that would actually help us get to a more concrete solution, and that would actually speed up the process of shipping the product. So that's one thing that I would say.
So the technology side?
So the technologies I know now is like vastly different from what I knew about a year and a half ago.
Right. So you already mentioned Python. What else do you use?
On the back end, I use Python as the server, Postgres as my database, and on the front end, I am currently playing around with React. The current site uses Knockout in the front, and the back end is pretty much the same. If I have to redo things, I would probably pick up on React first. It's so much more easier and faster in performance.
Was it like a lack of research, or you did with what you knew?
So Knockout was very easy to pick up. I mean, the learning curve was much lesser. I'm not saying React is hard. React is also pretty easy. But then, I mean, at that point, Knockout was much easier for me because I was more into the back end part, and front end was very, it was something I didn't want to handle, but like on the job you learn a lot more.
Circumstantial.
Right, and from a marketing perspective?
From a marketing perspective, one of our biggest go-to-market strategies, which has been working for us over the past 4 months, I would say, is something I wish I had figured out a lot earlier. So something that we realized over the last 4 months is that there is no high-quality content about these traditional events. So for example, you do not have a very good Wikipedia page about a Griha Pravesham. Right, about a housewarming ceremony, and the kind of content that was there online is really shoddy. So what we then ended up doing is writing really good high quality content that is SEO friendly, so that as soon as people Google something like, listeners can try this, Griha Pravesham Pandit Bangalore, we pop up somewhere within the top 7-8 results, and that has helped us get a lot of sales. That's one change that I would certainly make. Go towards the content strategy earlier, invest a little more time in producing high quality content which would be useful to users and would then lead them to our sales pages.
So do you guys have a content writer, you outsource it, or you guys do it yourself?
Yeah, I do all the content.
We joke him being the chief essay writing officer. So.
Okay. Yeah. So it is tough, right? I mean, you have to pick that up. I mean, not everybody.
True, I come from a content writing background. My first job was as a content. I used to write for B schools in the US, UK, and Canada, and clients like Pearson, McGraw-Hill, Wiley. So content writing is something that I love, something I've been doing ever since I was a kid. SEO is something I had to pick up on my own. It's a self-taught thing, and I'm loving the benefits are late.
Yeah, benefits are pretty late. I mean, you write something now, you'll probably reap something probably like 3 or 4 months later. So it's not something that
there's no instant gratification.
Yeah, there's no instant gratification in this. So.
Any good SEO tools that you guys recommend?
I would totally recommend every founder, irrespective of whether you're writing content or not, everyone should read the Guide to SEO Beginner's Guide to SEO by Rand Fishkin on moz.com.
That's probably the Bible for SEO tips.
Okay.
If you can go through that,
right. I mean, my site runs on FoundersGyan runs on WordPress, so I do know little bit about SEO. I use this plugin called Yoast.
Yoast,
which is pretty good. So is there something equivalent in your website?
Our entire tech is all custom built. So the reason why that is so is I have fine control over every bit of thing that happens.
Right. So, but how do you rank? How do you test your site against SEO? Is there an online site or a
Alexa
tool?
ranking?
Alexa rankings help to some extent, and most importantly, measuring what comes on your Google Analytics dashboard is important.
Right. Google Analytics.
The search queries.
Search queries. There's a search console on your Google Analytics account. Figure out what people are keying in, what kind of queries people are queuing in to, get on your site. And depending on that, just write better content for that and make sure your rankings go up for those
And
keywords.
Google AdWords has a keyword tool.
Keyword research tool.
Yeah, so when you're writing a new article on a particular topic, go through that keyword tool to figure out what are the common things people are looking for. I mean, it's very easy to get to the low-hanging fruits from that.
You get the search volume and the trends from Keyword Planner, and from there you can.
Right. So that is obviously the smart way to do it, because I think a lot of people, when they think about content, they just want to write something about their site, something that's relevant. I don't think a lot of people put in the research. So I think what you guys are saying, and I agree with it, is that research before you write. You might like to write about housewarming, but if you don't use the proper keywords.
So for example, for housewarming, it doesn't make sense for me to spell it as Gruha Pravesham. It is Griha Pravesh, which is searched the most. So that's how I spell it in my post and have it.
And the research, the amount of time or effort needed for this kind of research is very little, like in comparison to writing the article itself.
Right.
So,
the ROI is very high on the homework, so always do your homework.
Right. Okay. So now I just have a couple more quick questions. Now, we didn't touch on this when you were talking about your idea. So you were mentioning that most of the reach is organic, right? I mean, but did you do any kind of market research or anything like that before you went into it, or it just happened? You just had the site and it just happened.
our static site was the market research,
Okay.
When
so
we
you
had-
didn't go in for any focus group research?
No,
or
none of that, but we did speak to everyone around us. So
Whenever we spoke about this product, and we always got a positive response from our customers, people said, if this was something there, then I would definitely use it. And we saw that the need in people at that point.
So we started conversations with people on two fronts. We would ask them either about any event that's coming up in their life in the near future, or about their last event. So people remember either the past event or they know what they're looking forward to.
Right.
If they remember the past event, we would just ask them, what are the pain points you had? What do you remember that was bad?
Right.
And if they're looking forward to something, we would just ask them, what are the things you would need help with?
Right.
And then we would pitch them the idea that, hey, I'm building something like this.
Right.
So one thing I'm really glad, all three of us, we were very, very conscious not to get into that typical founder mentality of being in stealth mode. We never did that. We very openly spoke about the idea to everyone we met, which helped us get some really, really valuable feedback that has been helping us for over a year now.
Right. And how do you, apart from word of mouth, how do you acquire customers? Do you use paid marketing? Which one do you prefer if you do use paid?
So far we've spent a little bit of money on t-shirts that we wear everywhere. We spent about 300 rupees a t-shirt on 10 t-shirts, which we wear to malls and stuff. People see that, maybe they check us out. We have business cards.
we've got a few posters.
4 posters. We spent 150 rupees on.
Okay.
And apart from that, we haven't spent any.
So no Facebook advertising, no Google.
Nothing.
We have presence, but then we are not spending money on those.
We have a lot of
So there's no paid marketing that's
Well,
actively happening.
Very nice, very nice. So, any books? I think you already mentioned one book. Not really a book. I think it's an online read, right? About the SEO.
Yeah.
So, apart from that, any books that you guys recommend for startups, or could be fiction also, if you guys. I know you listen to a lot of podcasts, so. Maybe any books or resources, maybe you like to visit some blogs.
Sure.
There are so many, but then
One or two from each.
Okay, I'll talk from the designer's perspective. There's a book called About Face by Alan Cooper.
Okay.
It's a really, really good book on starting to think about design, why design is important, how you should go about design thinking, what is usability testing, what is user research, and how you should actually design the product based on if it's a desktop or if it's mobile. So that's a really good book to get all the basics. So I would recommend that.
Okay.
There's a podcast called Talk Python, which I've probably learned a lot from in the past 1 year. It's basically about what the environment in Python and something that Pythonistas would probably follow. they also talk about how companies like Dropbox or Pinterest use Python in their backend, those kind of things.
Very nice, very nice. I think this is the first time somebody has recommended a podcast. I mean, people have recommended podcasts, but from a programmer's perspective, I think this is the first time somebody has told me. So, in your opinion, is it easy to pick up things like on a programming
It makes
side?
you aware about things, like, and then once you're aware of some kind of technology or some kind of code that someone else has written, it becomes really easy to go look for it and then learn from it, and it makes the authors of these things really approachable, and they're all a tweet away basically. You can tell them, hey, I heard you on this show, like I want to know more.
Right, great. And
awesome. So I now have 2 of their quota stuff as well. Awesome. So there's 0 to 1 from Peter Thiel, which I'm sure a lot of people would have already recommended.
Right.
And then there's Tribes by Seth Godin, which is an awesome book to read as well from marketer's perspective. The 4-Hour Workweek by Tim Ferriss is awesome because it teaches you a lot about productivity. And the Tim Ferriss show is a must listen for any entrepreneur, I would say. So these are the main things. And one of the greatest online resource that all of us found was Y Combinator Startup School, which is a series of I think about 20 lectures,
20 YouTube videos.
20 YouTube videos in Stanford, if I'm not mistaken. Just as many iterations of that as possible. Every time you listen to those, you go away with one new takeaway.
Awesome.
Those are amazing.
Awesome. I'll put all those on the show notes page. I do have Tribes on my to read list, and sorry, what was the other thing you mentioned?
4-Hour Workweek by Tim Ferriss.
Tim Ferriss, yeah. Tim Ferriss also has a TV show, I think.
Yes. The Tim Ferriss Experiment.
Tim Ferriss Experiment. I think it's a great show, showing that you can pick up anything you want. I think that's really useful for startup people, right? We need to learn so many new skills. So I'm really grateful for you guys for taking so much time out and coming on the show.
Another quick thing I would just quickly recommend is for people who are building new products, it's very important to understand user psychology. So reading books about user psychology, user behavior, that helps a lot. So there's a book called Thinking Fast and Slow.
Right.
Dan Kahneman. Yeah. So that's an amazing book. So just read books that talk about people user psychology, and that helps a lot about thinking how users think, how they behave before you build a product.
Okay.
So that gives a really good insight into a user's mind.
Awesome. Now, before we move on to the final question, how can listeners get in touch with you? Obviously, if they are in Bangalore, they can, wherever they are, they can obviously check out your website, eventosaur.com, and if they are in Bangalore, they can use it for their services. For catering, puja, and
decoration, venues, photographers.
Right. But apart from that, I'm sure a lot of founders may find this show inspiring. They might want to get in touch with you personally to talk about something, maybe with you about Python or with you about design, with you about marketing. So can you each give me your personal, whatever, email or Twitter? I think you said Twitter you're active on, whichever, or multiple. Is
sure. On email, I'm reachable on nikhil@eventosaur.com. On Twitter, you can find me at nikhiljoisr, NIKHIL.
Right, we'll put that on the, no need to spell, we'll just put that on the.
Cool. I'm TJ@Eventosaur and I Bakasura on Twitter.
Okay.
So my email is setu@eventosaur.com and I'm setumad on Twitter.
Okay. Yeah. Excellent. So thanks so much, guys. I'm so grateful to you guys for coming on the show. And this is one final question. I'm sure you must have all listened to my podcast. So
yes.
I'm sure you're ready for it. So, but if there's one gyan, only one gyan that you could give, I'm kind of running out of ideas on how to do this because I've been telling, okay, it's not recording or things like that, but it's getting a little old. But so let me go back to my roots, which is like if there's only one gyan that you could give, would be founders. There are a lot of people, I'm sure lazy people will just go right to the end of the podcast just to listen to your one gyan. What would that be?
One each?
One each, yes.
Okay. So I'll start off.
Yeah, gyan I think is personal, right?
Yes,
it's not a company gyan, right?
So my one gyan is always assume they're going to make a movie out of your story and your startup story. Always assume it. And every time you're in a situation where you want to react, think about that movie. Do you think this is going to be a large scene there? Do you think it's going to be left out of the movie? Do you think it's going to be before the interval, after the intermission, when is it going to be? Is it something that you want in the movie? Then react to the situation. Because a startup tests you a lot. The journey is going to be made into a movie. Make sure only the good parts are in the movie.
Okay, excellent.
For me, I mean, coming from a tech thing, do not wait to learn something new to implement something. Like, whatever knowledge you have, try it out. If it doesn't work, you will eventually learn how to do it anyway.
Excellent. Learning on the fly, basically, right? Sidhu?
I would just have a very philosophical thing. So basically, just follow your heart. If you're in a company working 9 to 5 work, if you're not liking it, don't do things that you don't want to do. There's always, all of us quit our jobs that we were not enjoying, and then we started this with very less background in entrepreneurship or even the technical things that we knew, and then we have somehow reached here. So it's very possible that if you want to do something, then you can always do it. It's just that you have to take that leap. So have heart and then just follow your heart. That's it.
Okay, excellent. Thank you so much, guys.
Loved it, Ram. Thank you so much for having us on the show.
Thank you.
That's it for today, folks. I hope you got inspired and also got some new ideas on how to run your own startup. I'll see you all next week with yet another startup and its founder. In the meantime, please do take action on your own startup. Listening to podcasts, reading books, all that is fine, but action beats everything else. So please do that, and good luck on your startup adventure. Bye for now and have a great rest of the week ahead.